The night I found out, the wedding invitations were still warm from the printer. Eggshell or bone? The woman at the copy shop had asked. Eggshell, I'd said and thought, I'm about to build a life so delicate it needs its own color. I carried the stack between flat palms, smiling at strangers for no reason. Outside, a southeasterly wind howled along the street, blowing my hair into my lipstick. I texted Rhett. Got them. Do you want to see? Within a minute, he texted back, running late at the firm. Go ahead without me. I should have gone home and practiced my vows instead. I turned my car and drove toward the apartment I used to share with my best friend Zoe. She had asked for my old espresso machine when I moved in with Rhett. I'd said yes. We would make a cappuccino, and we'd lay the invitations out like tarot cards and pretend to read our future. The key was still on my keyring. I hadn't yet given it back to Zoe. I unlocked the door and let myself in. Zoe? I called, elbowing the door shut. I have good news and a specific need for caffeine. Music played faintly from the bedroom. The couch had been pushed sideways, and I saw one of Zoe's stilettoes lying on its side. As I put the invitations on the coffee table, a gust of wind from the open window flicked one to the floor. I should have picked it up and left. I should have done 100 small things that would have saved me the next 30 seconds. Instead, I walked across the soft rug, pushed open the bedroom door, and saw the end of the life I'd been calling ours. People always talk about the sound they make in these moments, a sound that belongs to animals in traps or ships cracking in ice. I went very quiet, and all I said was, "Oh." Zoe rolled away, pulling the sheet up too late to hide what didn't want hiding. Rhett sat up like someone yanked a rope inside his spine. It was comic, the choreography, two people trying to turn into furniture. "Rowan," Rhett blurted. "Meg," Zoe said, because she and only she called me by my middle name. My mother used to say Meg rubbed the hard edges off Rowan, and I was flattered by that. I looked back at the invitations on the coffee table beyond the half-closed door and thought, eggshell is the right word. It breaks the moment you look at it hard enough. I brought the espresso machine, I said, as if that explained me being here, as if I hadn't given it to her months ago. But you already have it, don't you? Rowan, we were going to... Rhett started. Tell me? My voice was steady. When? After the vows? Please, Zoe said. She had the grace to look wrecked. Please don't do the joke thing. I looked at Rhett's hair, absurdly perfect even now. One curl stuck to his forehead. I stepped backward and walked to the living room. In the living room, the card that was blown off by the wind still lay face down on the floor. I picked it up and read, Rowan Ellis and Rhett Hayes invite you to witness. Witness? I put it on top of the stack, then I carried the stack to the kitchen, slid open the drawer, and took out a matchbook from a restaurant we liked. I struck the match and held the flame above the edge of the top card close enough to catch, and not close enough to be a headline in tomorrow's paper. I blew the match out and put the invitations back on the table. Without another word, I left the apartment. Inside, something had died. I was shaking but couldn't cry. On the street, the wind had blown into a sprint. I walked into it and let it take me apart. Reaching my car, I started the engine and drove without deciding where until the highway turned coastal and the city thinned to weatherboards and gulls. 2 hours later, I rolled into Havens Bay, the small town where my aunt had left me a cottage and a studio I'd never used. When I pulled up beside the cottage, the bougainvillea was in full bloom. I got out of the car, walking towards the door, the key stuck in the lock. I leaned my forehead against the door and said, "Please." And just then, the door slid open. The cottage was a bit stuffy. The studio out back was all windows and one long counter. My aunt's kiln was in the corner, the metal lid dented. Sunlight lay across the floor. Exhausted, I lay on the couch and must have fallen asleep because I woke to sun streaming through the window and the sound of gulls outside. I walked to the kitchen, made some coffee, took a notepad, and made a list. 1. Buy coffee. 2. Buy sheets. 3. Contact the woman at the copy shop to cancel. 4. Cry later. I lasted until item 3. The thing about crying in a small town is someone will hand you a tissue no matter where you are. In line at the co-op, the woman ahead of me turned and offered one like she'd been waiting all morning to perform a small act of kindness. "First day here?" she asked. "First day of this version of me," I said, and it came out funny enough to make us both smile. "You'll fit," she said. "We all broke once." The cashier rang my coffee, the sheets, and my impulsive bar of chocolate with hazelnuts. "If you're staying a while," he said, "there's a spring fair in 3 weeks. We always need more hands." "What kind of fair?" I asked. "The kind where someone sells macrame plant hangers and another someone sells jars of pickles that could dissolve a car," he said. "There's music. We pretend we're not all related." "Sounds good. I'll be there," I said. Healing takes the form of chores at first. You do the dishes, you buy a broom, you patch a hole in the screen door and feel godlike for an hour. I cleaned the studio until my arms ached, and then I sat on the floor amid a slow tornado of clay dust and cried till my shoulders hitched. My nose had a mind of its own, spewing out mucus in every direction. Raw, loud sobs tore through my chest. There was no elegance in my tears, but it was healing. I felt relief. The next day, I took the old espresso machine from the studio cupboard where my aunt had stored everything she didn't like. I bought beans at the co-op and asked the cashier, "What do people here drink?" He said, "Anything hot and strong." "That I can do," I said. By the end of the week, my little studio smelled like coffee and clay. I slapped clay into coils, pressed thumbprints into cups, made a tray that was definitively not straight, and decided it was charming. I leaned my first bowl on the windowsill and was overjoyed at the way imperfection looked like a person in a mirror who had decided she was beautiful. On the 8th morning, I'd gone early to the pier with a travel mug because I heard that at dawn the sea sounded a lot like breathing. The planks were slick, and as I clung to the ropes, I heard a voice. "Careful," then turned. A man stood 2 boards away, one hand extended as if he could catch me from across the space. "There's a nail," he said, nodding at a tiny silver threat. "I'm Connor. I'm the town's unofficial tetanus prevention committee." "I'm Rowan," I said. Then, for reasons I couldn't explain, added, "People call me Meg." "Tetanus prevention appreciates full introductions," he said gravely. His eyes were the color of storms that pass. "You're new. Is it that obvious? You don't have the wind stance yet." "The what?" He planted his feet wide and leaned an inch into nothing. "The wind stance. You acquire it, or you end up in the bay at least once a month." "Is there a class I can take?" "Thursdays, 6 p.m., under the gull with the loudest opinions," he said. "Bring exact change." I laughed, and the sound surprised me because it didn't come with the familiar post-laughter sting. He smiled like he'd been hoping to hear that sound. "You live here or commute for your tetanus gig?" I asked. "Live here," he said. "Paramedic and I volunteer with Sea Rescue when the radio won't leave us alone." "Isn't it always leaving you alone or never with radios?" "Only one way to find out," he said. "Stay long enough." He walked to the edge of the pier and looked out into the distance. I looked at the line of boats, at the gulls arguing like kids. "My aunt left me a cottage," I said, because silence suddenly felt like a form of dishonesty. "Lucky you," he said. "She also left me a kiln," I said. "Lucky is the town I will endanger with my terrible bowls." "If you sell terrible bowls at the fair, we'll buy them," he said. "We have a high tolerance for earnest attempts." "Good," I said. "Earnest attempts are my only offerings at present." He glanced at my travel mug. "Coffee?" "Passably good." "I'll buy a cup if you're selling." "Sold," I said, and didn't mind that it made us both smile again. If betrayal is a cliff, recovery is a staircase. You think you've reached a landing, and then, surprise, another step. It was a slow process, one day at a time. I kept myself busy making bowls, and I burned my fingers. Many times I considered just buying plates like a normal person. The mornings on the pier became a habit, the kind you don't talk about or else it calcifies and falls apart. Sometimes Connor showed up, sometimes he didn't. When he did, we learned about each other in the slow way. Jobs, then favorite sandwiches. His is egg and rocket, mine, tomato and butter, controversial. Then music. He tolerated my playlists, and I tolerated his insistence that every song should be listened to all the way through at least once. "Why Havens Bay?" he asked one morning. "My aunt," I said, "and the way the wind sounds like someone telling a story. She loved that sound." "That's specific," he said, amused. "I'm going through a specific time." He nodded. "Me too," he said. We left it there because specifics sometimes do better inside their own walls. I saw him around town, kneeling on a sidewalk beside an elderly man who'd slipped, his voice soft, his hands efficient, hauling crates at the co-op like it was a gym membership, leaning in the doorway of the rescue station, laughing at something I couldn't hear. There was a bracelet on his wrist, braided and worn. He never fussed with it. It just lived there. One afternoon, my kiln moaned in a way metal shouldn't. I leaned over it and said, "Don't you dare." It dared. The heat plummeted. The little light that had been faithfully red went green. I texted Piper, the woman who ran the fair. "I have a problem with the kiln," and explained the groan and light changes. "Might not have stock," she replied. "Do you know Connor?" His brother used to fix kilns. "Connor's annoyingly useful in that way." I stood very still and then typed, "I know him, sort of." "Ask. He always says yes anyway," Piper replied. I called Connor and explained the problem. He turned up at the studio with a toolbox and a calmness that made my frantic energy feel like glitter in the air, unnecessary but not unkindly judged. He crouched beside the kiln and listened to it. "Element's gone," he said. "Can it be ungone?" "It can be replaced." "Will it explode if we do it wrong?" "I'll stand between you and the blast radius," he said. "I like you with eyebrows." We worked side by side in the kind of silence that is all doing and no thought. He handed me the right screwdriver without my asking. I held the flashlight. My fingers brushed his once, and for a moment it felt like leaning over a balcony and not being sure if you were falling or just noticing you could. When we finished, the kiln hummed back to life. Warmth bloomed. "You saved the fair," I said. "I found a wire," he said. "You can let me be grateful." Smiling, he asked, "Do you want to test fire?" I nodded, and we stood there watching numbers we didn't understand climb toward a temperature that meant survival. Outside the window, the wind tried to rearrange the bougainvillea and then gave up. "Can I ask you something?" I said. He tipped his head. "You can ask." "The bracelet." He looked at it as if remembering it had a body to sit on. "My brother made it," he said. "And?" "He died." "I'm sorry." "Me too," he said. "It was years ago. It still sometimes feels like yesterday, and other days it feels like a story I was told by someone with bad timing." "Bad timing is my least favorite genre," I said. "Worse than betrayal?" "Betrayal is just a plot twist that forgot to be kind," I said, and immediately wanted to swallow the sentence. "Sorry?" "It's one way to say it," he said. He didn't ask for the story. I told the story in short version. I had a fiancé. He and my best friend believed in community property. He was quiet for a beat. "And you left?" "And I left." "Good," he said with a certainty that felt like a hand on a railing steadying me at the edge of a long drop. "Then I'd like to meet the version of you who left." We watched the kiln's little red light like it could predict a future. When the element finally thrummed into its old confidence, Connor exhaled. It felt like the studio did too. "Test pieces?" he asked. I showed him a tray of awkward bowls, a family of cups with ears too big for their faces. "I like this one," he said, picking up a cup whose lip leaned like it had heard a secret. "It's already listening." "Listening to what?" "Whoever drinks from it." He set it down as if you could bruise clay. "You'll be fine at the fair," he added. "Trust me." "I don't. Yet," I said, "but I'll borrow yours." "Deal." He left with a wave from the door, and the wind caught it. That night on the studio floor with my back to a bag of clay, I looked at the neat stack of wedding invitations still in their copy shop ribbon. Eggshell. The word felt like a dare. I Googled in the soft glow of my phone, paper clay, adding fiber to clay bodies, recipes, cautions, the thrill of not asking permission. I tore one invitation into strips, then into smaller confetti. I stood above a bowl with my ruined future and thought, what if I make something that holds? I worked until midnight kneading paper into the clay. In the morning, the mixture felt stronger and lighter. 3 days before the fair, Piper stopped by the studio with a clipboard, a braid, and the kind of sunglasses that say, "Don't lie to me, I'm useful." "Stock?" she asked. "Barely," I said, and gestured to the shelves, which now held 23 pieces that were okay. Some of them are even intentional. She picked up the leaning lip cup. "Oh, this is trouble," she said, delighted. "What are you calling your stall?" I glanced at the bougainvillea making up dramas beyond the window, at the espresso machine soldering on, at my hands. "Wind and Clay," I said. She wrote it down. "Good. You're between Sourdough Boys and the Pickle Witch." The witch bites more than her pickles, but only if you flirt with her boyfriend, which we all do because he looks like a cinnamon roll. Bring change, a smile, and lower expectations. We'll take care of the rest. "Got it," I said. "What's the return policy on expectations?" "You can exchange them for snacks." After she left, I made a small sign with a brush. Wind and Clay. Cups, bowls, imperfect plates, coffee by donation. At the bottom, in small letters I hoped no one would read, made with eggshell paper clay. The day before the fair, the weather looked as if it was turning for the worse, but then didn't. I packed the car, the kiln purring through its last firing. At dawn, I carried my things to the green. Stalls were up, someone tuned a guitar, someone else arranged jars of cucumbers that looked like they could dissolve clay. The cinnamon roll boyfriend was, in fact, ridiculous. Piper pointed me to my table. "The witch approves of your sign," she said, flicking her sunglasses to the top of her head. "You're safe from curses." "Excellent," I said. I left my protective amulet in my other backpack. By 8, a trickle became a stream. Kids with face paint, old men with opinions about weather, a woman leading a goat that wore a scarf. Connor appeared at 10 in a bright vest that advertised first aid carrying a clipboard. "Rescue station?" I asked. "Fielding bee stings and feelings," he said. "How's business?" I waved at my modest money box. "Someone bought a crooked plate on purpose." I didn't argue. "Want coffee?" "Only if I can pay in cash and gratitude," he said. "You can pay in wind stance lessons," I countered. He widened his feet slightly, just to make me laugh, then took his cup gently like something more than caffeine was inside. By noon, I had sold 5 cups, 2 bowls, and 1 plate I apologized to on its way out. A teenager stopped and read my tiny line at the bottom of the sign. "Made with eggshell paper clay," she said. "That's a vibe." "It's repurposed regret," I said, and wished I'd said it in my head. She blinked, then grinned. "That's even more of a vibe." At 1 p.m., the band tried to harmonize and failed adorably. At 1:07, a man tripped over his own joy near the lemonade stall and went down hard. Connor trotted over with his first aid kit. I watched his hands, calm and competent, as he checked the man's ankle, wrapped it, and reassured him he would be all right. It was nothing dramatic, really, but I felt it in my ribs, that steadying you get from watching someone be good at kindness. When he came back by my stall, I offered him a cup of water in one of my cups, the leaning lip one. He drank, but didn't put the cup back. "How much?" he asked. "That one's mine," I said, before I could think. "But I can make you one that listens the same way." "I want this one," he said gently. "It already knows my mouth." My face answered for me. "Okay," I said, and wrote "sold" on a sticky note. Around 3, the wind picked up and the canopies all flutter wildly. The pickle witch barked at the sky. Piper came by and put a lemon bar in my pocket. "You're doing well," she said. "People love your work." I smiled, feeling my cheeks turn red. Then, Rhett walked out of the crowd like a human reminder. He wore the same absurdly perfect hair, the same jacket, the same look of someone rehearsing sincerity. "Rowan," he said, "I heard you were here." "From whom?" I asked. My own voice surprised me. Neither ice nor flame. Zoe, he said, and touched the back of his neck in a move that used to make me forgive him for leaving dishes in the sink. She said I should give you space. I gave you space, but I needed to say I'm sorry. The sound on the green dimmed, or maybe I was listening to a different music now. Okay, I said. I just... He glanced at the cups, at my sign, at wind and clay like it was something you do before you figure out what you should do. I made the worst possible choice. I'm seeing someone. A therapist. I know that doesn't... He swallowed. I wanted to ask if we could talk. Later. Not here. I looked at his mouth forming the old shapes. At the bracelet on Connor's wrist, 3 stalls away, dark against sun. At my hands, clay under my nails. We are talking, I said. I mean, really talk. I don't want that, I said. I wish you well. I wish Zoe well. I'm not... I searched for a word that wasn't performance. Available. He flinched at the last word like it was a slap. Maybe it was. I'm sorry, he said again, and for the first time I believed him. Not in a way that required me to do anything with the belief. Thank you, I said. Please don't come by again. He nodded and turned, walking into the wind. When I looked up, Connor stood a few steps away, close enough to be there, far enough to be kind. You okay? He asked. Yes, I said, surprised to discover it was true. Shaky, but okay. Do you want me to pretend I didn't see? Or do you want to joke about tetanus? Dealer's choice, he considered. It's good you're up to date on your shots, he said. Because? Because closure is a rusty nail. Everyone steps on it once. I laughed, and the laugh didn't bend into a sob on the way out. That's terrible, I said. Thank you. I'll be here all week. The fair closed with a song everyone in town knew except me. I hummed anyway. Piper handed out leftover lemon bars. The witch hugged me with both arms and said, "You'll do," which I understood. At home, the studio smelled like success. I counted my money box and wrote numbers that didn't matter much. I put aside the sold cup on a shelf by the window, the one that listened. Below it, I placed the last of the invitations, now torn and softened, ready to become clay. I slept so well that night, far beyond what I expected. The next morning, I met Connor on the pier without planning to. Dawn had left fingerprints on the water. He handed me a thermos without fanfare. Coffee, he said. I tried to make it like you do. I sipped. You have no idea what you're doing, I said, impressed. None, he said cheerfully. That's why I brought your thermos back to you, full of your own supplies. We stood with our shoulders almost touching. The world made sensible noises. A gull flew above. I have a confession, Connor said after a while. Go on. I've been looking for an excuse to ask you to come to the rescue shed some evening. There's a terrible couch. If you sit at one end and I sit at the other, the middle caves, and we end up sliding toward each other against our will. It's slapstick. It could be our origin myth. That's a bold pitch, I said. I could tone it down. I could ask you to come over so I can fix your smoke alarm, which I have arbitrarily decided chirps at 2 a.m. It does, I said. Each chirp arrives like an uninvited idea. He smiled at the water. Come anyway, he said, if you want. I thought about the version of me that labeled shelves and apologized to furniture, about the version that left with wind in her mouth, about a cup that listened, a bracelet that stayed, and a man who stood between me and the blast radius of my bad luck and said, I like you with eyebrows. I want, I said. We didn't kiss then, we watched the water ripple. Over the next weeks, the plan held. We ate tuna melts on the terrible couch and slid into each other laughing. We walked the length of the beach and learned which shells sounded like bells, which like bones. Connor told me about his brother and the slow way you reserve for things that can still break. I told him about the espresso machine and the bedroom door that ended a life. We swapped hurts. We were cautious with names. We didn't say girlfriend or boyfriend the way you do when you're not sure. Instead, we said Tuesday and Thursday and the pier and the couch that wants us together, whether we like it or not. We said wind and clay and meant build something.
I'd like to take a moment and pause. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Please show a kindness by clicking like and subscribe. It would help our channel so much. Let's continue our story.
On a night when the wind shouted and the rain signed its name on the windows, the rescue radio yelped. Connor went still in the way good people do when called. Kayak, he said, off the point. Go, I said, stepping aside. He stared at me like he wanted to apologize to me. I'll text after. I kissed his cheek. The hours that followed were long. I made coffee I didn't need. I folded a dish towel and then unfolded it. I sat on the floor beside the kiln and told it the story of a girl who had stopped apologizing. When the door finally opened, Connor stood there, soaked and exhausted, grinning sideways. Okay? I asked, already crying in ridiculous relief. Okay, he said. Cold, but okay. I handed him a towel. Gently, he put his forehead against mine. Hi, he said. Hi, I said. We stood in that small circle and laughed because the towel dripped on our feet and the kiln blinked its little red eye. A week later, the co-op cashier rang up my coffee and sheets and a celebratory bar of chocolate with hazelnuts. You look, decided. I redecorated my heart, I said. Fewer fragile things, more shelves. Back at the studio, I wedged the last of the paper clay. The invitations had dissolved completely. The batch felt strong. I threw 2 cups, one slightly taller than the other. When they dried, I etched a small wind line along each and glazed them in a soft white I mixed until it landed somewhere between bone and eggshell, between what I almost had and what I chose instead. That morning, I wrote Zoe a letter that I didn't send. We were good once, that matters. I'm learning the difference between a door and a wall, and I hope you are too. No reply needed. Be well. I folded the letter and put it in a drawer marked paper I keep until I'm healed. The cups came out with small freckles where the paper had burned clean, tiny constellations, proof that something had been there and was now part of the structure without showing its outline. I poured coffee into both and carried them to the pier at dawn. Connor was already there, of course he was. We stood with our shoulders almost touching and handed each other our cups. What do we call these? The wind stance, I said. Left foot slightly forward, weight toward what's coming. He laughed. Then here's to what's coming. We drank. I'm not going back, I said, surprising myself with how easy the sentence was now. I didn't think you were, and with a gentleness he said, I'm glad you're here. We didn't kiss like the end of a movie. We kissed like the beginning of something new. Later at the studio, I hung my wind and clay sign on a hook by the door. I set the 2 cups on the windowsill. The light caught their freckles and made them look constellated. I texted Piper, Do we do the fair every month? She replied in all caps, We do a small one. Bring more of whatever he's drinking out of. I looked at Connor's cup and then at mine and thought, yes to more, yes to the practiced ordinary that adds up to a life, yes to a hand on a railing when the drop is long, yes to being the version of me who left and stayed and made something that holds. The wind lifted and I widened my stance without thinking. The cup listened. The day started and I let it. Thank you for spending time with me. If this story moved you, share it. Someone else might need to hear it too. God bless you.